Fox News alert along the Korean Peninsula. South Korea's military is on high alert as the North prepares to mark 85 years since the formation of its People's Army. In the meantime, China, North Korea's main ally, putting its military bombers at the ready in response to the North's suggestion of a super mighty preemptive strike if the United States were to act. President Trump tweeting this morning, China is very much the economic lifeline to North Korea, so while nothing is easy, if they want to solve the North Korean problem, they will. William Perry is a former Secretary of Defense under President Bill Clinton. He also led diplomatic efforts with North Korea as well after his role at the Defense Department. It's one of the great reasons we have him on the program. Secretary Perry, it's nice to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's because of your background in defense and diplomacy and that intersection between the two that we're particularly interested in. I'm just wondering, because so few of us have ever sat across the table and tried to negotiate with the North Koreans. Tell our viewers a little bit about that experience and what that was like.
Well, the first thing I would say is that many people say that the North Koreans are crazy. I do not agree. They are ruthless, they are reckless, but they are not crazy. They have shrewdly kept the regime alive where Stalinist regimes all over the world have collapsed for many decades now. So this is a formidable adversary. We should not underestimate them.
At the same time, you say there might be a moment here where coercive diplomacy may be effective. Why do you think we're at that moment, and what would coercive diplomacy look like?
Well, our diplomacy for the last two administrations has been a dismal failure. And so the reasonable question to ask, why might it be able to succeed now? And I think there are two important things that have changed. First and most importantly, the Chinese, which have taken very little action on this in the last few decades, have now become greatly concerned. The possibility, a very real possibility, of a war on the Korean Peninsula would be very adverse to their core interests. In addition to that, the possibility of Japan or South Korea going nuclear would be very adverse to their interests. So I think we have their attention now. And I do believe that if the administration were to approach carefully, and I would say quietly, the Chinese government, we would find that they might be willing to work together in putting together a coercive diplomatic package, which I believe could be effective with North Korea.
What would have to be in that package?
Well, the package would have to get their attention, so it had to have some coercive elements to it. And we do not have the coercive elements the Chinese do. There's a major supplier of food and fuel to North Korea. And if they were to threaten to cut off that food and fuel, that would be a very serious issue. We have some incentives we can offer North Korea, but the incentives are not enough. Together, though, our incentives and the Chinese disincentives would be a powerful package, and I think would get North Korea's attention.
In the past, and we've mentioned this on the program, whether it's Republican or Democrat, past negotiations have failed. You were very candid about the negotiations that were happening during the Clinton administration, and you said that you felt you were close at the time to getting some sort of a deal, but time ran out on that. Based on what you learned, though, from that experience and what you've watched over the last several administrations, what would you have done different, or what would you advise this administration not to do to get a different result, which is ultimately a successful deal somehow with North Korea?
Well, the incentives we offered then were enough to get their attention because they did not then have a nuclear program. But they now have a nuclear program, and they're very reluctant to give it up. So incentives will not be enough, and weak disincentives like sanctions are not enough. So it takes strong disincentives, and China has those to offer. We can also offer incentives. One of the major things that they were interested in from the United States is recognition. It costs us nothing, but it would be a big factor to them and would be a big incentive to them to negotiate.
That's very interesting. You say military action, and I'm mentioning this because of all the bluster from all sides. You say that military action really isn't appropriate yet. When would it be?
I do believe that a preemptive strike by the United States today, that kind of military action, would precipitate a very strong military response from North Korea, not against the United States, but against South Korea. And that response, I'm afraid, could easily escalate into a general nuclear war. A general nuclear war is a war which the United States and South Korea would win in time. But in the meantime, there'd be devastation in South Korea. We have to understand that Seoul, the capital city, with more than 20 million people, is within 50 miles of North Korea. So they could do a tremendous amount of damage to South Korea before they finally lost the war. Also, if they were losing the war, they may then, in a spasmodic reaction, launch some nuclear weapons as a last desperate move, a last sort of a nuclear North Korean Armageddon. We want to avoid, that's a low probability, but we want to avoid that kind of a catastrophe. I do not believe that North Korea will launch a surprise nuclear attack against the United States, against South Korea, against Japan. I think that's the wrong thing to worry about. The thing to worry about is blundering into a war.
You give us a lot to think about, and with your expertise in particular. Secretary Perry, it's great to have you on the program. We appreciate it. We look forward to having you back. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to talk to you, Jenna.